One wrong step, one moment of lost focus, that's all it took to turn viral content creation into the 6 most shocking TikTok deaths ever recorded. These aren't just tragic accidents from risky filming locations. They're reminders that in the pursuit of the perfect shot, the smallest miscalculation can become the ultimate price. It was August 2019, a gusty afternoon at a coastal overlook where sandstone met the Pacific in tall swells. Brody Keller, 23, worked grounds for a small property services outfit, making him practical with tools and patient with routines. Off shift, he chased clean shots. Outgoing and gear-savvy, he handled tripods and action cams with confidence. He and a friend, 24, a careful delivery driver, parked at a public turnout and walked the bluff path. An older couple in their late 50s moved slowly along the rail. A maintenance worker in his 50s checked posts, pausing at a sign urging visitors to stay back from the edge. Foreshadowing marked the rim, loose granules over hardpan, a seam running like a crack near the lip, and low shrubs clinging to shallow soil. Onshore wind pulsed at 20 to 30 miles per hour, gusts lifting caps and rattling leaves. The sandstone showed undercutting from weeks of wave action and recent rain, creating a deceptive shelf that looked stable from above. Brody set a compact tripod several feet from the edge and pitched a wide frame to capture a breaker hitting the cliff base. Spray rising into wind, shot in the vertical trend format to capture the full height of the spray. He checked the horizon and exposure, then stepped sideways to center himself in the foreground. Composition demanded inches, not yards. Lateral footwork pushed his right heel onto small gravel that rolled like ball bearings. Traction dipped. He adjusted the phone screen, body angled to shield glare. The rim's fracture followed the undercut line. A palm-sized segment parted, then a larger sliver cleaved away under his rear foot. The surface lowered unexpectedly. He reached for a knee-high shrub. The root mass tore free from sandy fill. Center of mass crossed the threshold. The friend shouted and lunged for empty air. Brody went over the lip in a clean arc, descending past a vertical face toward a ledge roughly 25 to 30 feet down. The sandstone offered no handholds, only hard angles and thin sand. Contact with the lower shelf redirected his path, and momentum carried him beyond into a narrow chute toward the surf zone. Water boomed in sets, masking echoes from rock. The tripod stayed put near the rim, legs splayed, a silent witness. The older couple waved their arms. The maintenance worker ran to the nearest post with a mile marker and relayed coordinates. Cell service held. The friend scrambled back from the rim and traced a safe path to flag responders. A team arrived from the nearest access point, then a rope unit with helmets and litters. Wind made lines hum. Crews secured anchor points well back from the rim and edged down toward the shelf where loose gear had come to rest. The search located the phone clamp on the lower ledge and a lens cap near a fissure, then continued to the base where the chute met tidewater. Conditions limited how close the team could work between sets. Timing mattered as much as footing. The scene stabilized under incident command, and the bluff closed for the duration. Hours later, recovery concluded. The path reopened with new barricades that pushed visitors yards from the lip, and fresh caution boards spelled out what had been visible. Undercut edges fail without warning, wind strips traction, and sand turns solid rock into a slide. Investigators noted contributing factors: recent precipitation, marine erosion, loose granules at the rim, and proximity for camera framing. They emphasized that safe shots come from farther back with longer lenses or elevated vantage points where setback is fixed. Brody's friend gave a statement and returned to the turnout as dusk took color out of the water. In the weeks after, friends organized a memorial at a safer overlook. Flowers tied to a rail set well inside the line where sandstone ended. The clip he had tried to make, wave striking stone, spray lifting into wind, kept happening on schedule. The ocean didn't change. The approach would need to. It was November 2020, a late afternoon when golden light slanted across the abandoned warehouse district, casting shadows between brick buildings that had stood empty for years. Clara Jennings, 21, worked retail at a mid-sized department store, a job that taught patience with details and an eye for presentation. Off the clock, she was a meticulous editor who planned shots carefully, Drawn to unusual city vistas, most people never noticed. She arrived with her friend, 22, a film student who understood angles and lighting. They parked near a loading dock where a security guard made routine rounds, keeping unauthorized visitors moving. Teenage skaters had gathered nearby, curious about the camera gear. Rooftop access came through a service stairwell with a door marked by faded no-access notices, weathered to near illegibility. Clara had scouted the location days earlier, noting partial guardrails and translucent skylight panels that carried warnings about foot traffic. The building showed its age, patches of corrosion, UV-degraded materials, and seams where panels met support beams in questionable ways. She carried a compact tripod and lightweight camera, planning a sunset reveal sequence framing the downtown skyline, meant for repost clips showcasing urban exploration. Clara reached the roof and scanned for the best angle, settling near a skylight bay where the city spread in clean lines. The shot required a low camera position for dramatic foreground, meaning stepping closer to the translucent panels forming part of the roof structure. She set the tripod and adjusted the frame, then shifted one step left to avoid a support post, cutting into composition. Her foot landed on a weathered panel at an overlapped seam between support members, a junction that looked solid from above but had been compromised by years of thermal cycling and UV exposure. The panel flexed under her weight, then gave way with a sharp crack as the seam fractured along the overlap line. The translucent material had been rated for light transmission, not foot traffic, and decades of weather had made it brittle. Clara dropped through the opening between beams, her hands briefly catching the edge before surrounding material shifted and her grip was lost. The fall continued through a light well-designed to bring natural illumination to the floor below, where debris from years of neglect had accumulated. Her friend, still on solid decking, witnessed the panel failure and descent path, immediately understanding the situation had gone beyond anything they could handle. The emergency call went out within minutes, but responders faced challenges navigating locked interior gates and finding clear routes to upper floors. The friend coordinated with the security guard to guide the response team through corridors and stairwells leading to the roof level. The scene was secured with rigid barriers over remaining fragile panels, and additional warning signs were posted at access points. The incident report emphasized hidden dangers of skylights and fragile roof materials, particularly on older buildings where UV degradation and thermal stress had compromised structural integrity. Local safety groups began circulating guidance about risks of filming on disused structures, noting rooftops often contained hazards not immediately visible. The warehouse district saw increased patrols and better securing of access points. In weeks that followed, Clara's friends organized a tribute at a public overlook, with certified railings and maintained safety barriers, where the same skyline could be captured without the risks that made the warehouse rooftop appealing. The sunset reveal shot she had planned continued every evening, light moving across the city in predictable patterns. But the approach to capturing it would need to account for hidden dangers lurking beneath seemingly solid surfaces. It was May 2019, a clear afternoon when suburban rail traffic moved on schedule through a crossing near a gentle curve, with a slight downgrade that increased approach speeds. Jason McAllister, 26, worked as a dispatcher for a local courier outfit, a job requiring quick thinking and precise timing, skills that translated into his hobby of creating timing-based camera tricks and perspective shots. He had an upbeat personality that made him popular on social media, always animated on camera and confident with forced perspective techniques. He arrived at the crossing with two friends, 25 and 27, both weekend hobby filmmakers who appreciated technical shots. The location offered a straight view down the tracks, but a curve about 200 yards to the east limited sight distance for eastbound trains. A jogger in his 40s used this route regularly, familiar with the crossing's timing. The municipal signals crew worked nearby on routine maintenance. Jason had posted an earlier phone clip showing warning lights behaving inconsistently during maintenance work. The plan was simple: record a forced perspective clip with a passing train appearing closer in the background than it actually was, a popular technique requiring precise positioning and timing. designed for his growing follower base who loved his perspective tricks. Jason set up just inside the railroad's restricted right-of-way, closer than legally permitted but necessary for the visual effect. As he adjusted his stance for the perfect angle, ballast stones rolled under his shoe, causing his footing to wobble. He recentered himself while monitoring the camera screen, focused more on composition than his exact position relative to the track. The eastbound train emerged from the curve sooner than anticipated, the slight downgrade adding speed that made distance and timing calculations difficult. The curve had obscured the train's approach until it was much closer than expected, and the clearance envelope around moving trains proved tighter than Jason had estimated. Railroad clearance envelopes are designed with minimal margins for safety, and any intrusion creates immediate danger. As the train passed, a protruding side element extended nearer to the track edge than Jason had calculated, particularly at the curve transition where the consist's geometry shifted. He found himself within the clearance zone at the critical moment, with no time to step back to safety. His friends shouted warnings and rushed toward him, but the physics of the situation had already been set in motion. The crossing was immediately closed as emergency responders and railroad personnel arrived. His friends provided statements about the sequence of events, noting sightline limitations created by the curve and ballast instability that had affected Jason's footing. The jogger confirmed that the curve made it difficult to judge train speed and distance accurately. Railroad officials emphasized that the clearance envelope around moving trains allows no margin for error. The incident prompted immediate safety improvements at the crossing, including additional signage warning about clearance envelopes and dangers of filming within railroad property limits. Fencing was installed to make unauthorized access more difficult. The local community launched an outreach campaign discouraging filming within railroad property, emphasizing that safe distance alternatives existed on public land. Investigation revealed that the combination of factors, the curve limiting visibility, loose ballast affecting stability, maintenance activity creating confusion, and positioning within the restricted zone, had created a perfect storm of risk. The forced perspective technique Jason had been attempting remained popular on social media, but safety advocates began promoting methods that achieved similar visual effects from legal, safe distances outside railroad property boundaries. It was September 2021, a pre-dawn morning when mountain air held the chill of early autumn and katabatic winds began their daily shift as the sun approached the eastern peaks. Elise Rowland, 24, worked as a barista at a local cafe, a job that required patience with early hours and attention to detail, qualities that translated into her passion for dawn time-lapses and natural light photography. She was methodical in her approach, always checking weather forecasts and testing gear, known among friends for capturing perfect golden hour moments. She had arrived at the trailhead with her hiking partner, 25, an off-duty EMT observant about safety. The destination was a narrow sandstone fin that jutted from the main ridge, offering dramatic views across the valley where cyclists could be seen far below. A park ranger in his 30s monitored radio traffic from a nearby station. The weather forecast had noted increasing gusts toward sunrise, a common pattern as temperature differentials created wind shifts in mountain terrain. Elise had posted an earlier clip showing her cap being lifted by wind, a playful moment that would serve as an ominous preview of conditions on the exposed ridge. The approach required careful navigation along a narrow trail with steep drop-offs on both sides. Fine sand had accumulated on smooth sandstone surfaces, deposited by previous windstorms and creating a layer that acted like ball bearings on solid rock beneath. Elise set up her tripod on what appeared to be a stable, flat patch near the edge of the fin, aiming east to capture the sunrise sequence. Perfect for her sunrise series that had been gaining traction. Her partner noted that the tripod's rubber feet briefly skidded during a gust, a warning sign of challenging conditions. As the light improved, Elise made adjustments to her framing to reduce lens flare, leaning slightly to shield the camera from increasing wind. The gusts were building in intensity as temperature differential between the warming valley and cool ridge created predicted wind shifts. She stepped onto a lightly sanded patch to get a better angle, immediately feeling her traction decrease abruptly on smooth sandstone beneath a fine layer of dust. Her feet began to slide toward the steep slope that dropped away from the fin, and she attempted to halt momentum by planting her hands and one knee on the rock surface. The combination of smooth sandstone, fine sand acting as lubricant, and increasing wind gusts created conditions where arrest was nearly impossible once momentum began. Elise continued sliding toward the runout below the fin, tumbling over rock shelves in the fall zone that extended far down the mountainside. Her partner, maintaining safe stance away from the fin's edge, called out and carefully marked the last seen point while avoiding the same hazardous conditions. The partner immediately contacted search and rescue teams, who staged their response from the nearest trailhead and began navigating loose rock and challenging wind conditions to reach the accident site. The terrain below the fin was difficult to access, requiring specialized equipment and experienced climbers. The area was temporarily closed during the extended rescue operation. Post-incident analysis revealed that the combination of smooth sandstone, accumulated fine sand, and increasing wind gusts had created a perfect storm of hazardous conditions on the narrow fin. The trail approach was updated with stronger warnings, designating the fin as expert-only terrain, with specific advisories about wind conditions and slip hazards created by sand accumulation on smooth rock surfaces. The incident prompted updates to park literature and trail maps, adding detailed guidance about filming setups that emphasized staying well back from ridge edges, especially during periods of forecast wind. The sunrise time-lapse that Elise had planned to capture continued to occur every morning, but future photographers would need to account for hidden dangers lurking beneath seemingly solid surfaces. It was March 2020, an early morning when riverside mist clung to the water and the first joggers began their daily routes along pedestrian paths connecting downtown to residential neighborhoods. Connor Hayes, 28, worked as an electrician for a small contractor, a job that made him comfortable around construction sites and confident with tools and temporary structures. He had a practical mindset shaped by years of troubleshooting electrical systems, but also enjoyed the creative side of filming, particularly smooth gimbal walkthroughs that showcased his steady hands and technical skills. He had arrived at the bridge with his coworker, 29, an apprentice electrician who was pragmatic and safety-minded. The pedestrian bridge spanning the river had been closed for repairs, with sections of decking removed and covered by tarps to protect the work area from weather. Morning joggers in their 30s and 40s passed by on the adjacent pathway, following regular routes while the bridge remained off-limits. A municipal inspector in his 50s had been overseeing the project. The bridge showed clear signs of ongoing work, temporary bracing under sections, caution tape that fluttered in the morning breeze, and bridge closed signs at both entrances, though barriers had been partially displaced by previous unauthorized access. Connor had brought his new handheld gimbal to test its stabilization capabilities, planning to record a smooth walking reveal shot that would showcase the river view as he crossed from one side to the other, hoping to showcase his steady technique to his small but growing audience. The technique required steady movement and consistent framing, skills that translated well from his electrical work, where precision and steady hands were essential. As he proceeded along the span, Connor walked onto a section where tarps had been placed to cover areas where decking had been removed for repair. The tarps were slick with condensation from the morning mist, creating an additional hazard that wasn't immediately apparent. He planted his foot where the decking was absent beneath the tarp, his leg dropping into the void that had been masked by the covering. His hands briefly caught the edge of a joist, but the adjacent material shifted under the unexpected load, and the tarp became slippery, causing his grip to fail. The fall from the bridge span carried him toward the shallow riverbed below, where rocky substrate and uneven terrain created dangerous landing conditions. His co-worker, who had been following several paces behind and witnessed the entire sequence, immediately called out and rushed to assess the situation from the bridge deck above. The shallow water and rocky bottom made the impact particularly severe. Emergency services were dispatched quickly, with responders accessing the scene from a nearby roadway that provided direct access to the riverbank. The bridge was immediately resecured with rigid fencing at both ends and clearer closure notices that left no ambiguity about the prohibition on public access. The incident report highlighted the specific dangers of covered voids on closed structures, noting how tarps and other temporary coverings could mask serious hazards while also creating slippery surfaces. The contractor community received updated guidance about respecting closure barriers, even when workers were familiar with construction sites and felt confident navigating temporary structures. The incident emphasized that off-hours access to work zones carried risks that weren't always apparent, particularly when protective coverings obscured actual conditions beneath. The municipality accelerated the repair schedule and implemented updated barrier standards for closed structures. It was January 2019, a cool morning when overnight drizzle had left slick patches on concrete surfaces throughout the city, creating hazardous conditions that weren't immediately obvious. Tiffany Moran, 22, worked as a receptionist at a regional clinic, a job that required her to be cheerful and energetic with patients and staff. Off the clock, she channeled that same upbeat personality into social media content, particularly dance challenges that showcased her ability to learn choreography quickly and perform it with consistent precision. She had arrived at the multi-level parking structure with her friend, 21, a college student who served as her driver and filming assistant. The rooftop level offered an unobstructed view of the city skyline, making it popular for content creators seeking dramatic urban backgrounds. Two office workers in their late 20s were taking a break on the rooftop. A building attendant in his 60s made regular patrols. The rooftop featured a low parapet wall around the perimeter, roughly waist-high for someone of Tiffany's stature. Designed more for architectural aesthetics than serious fall protection, the dance challenge required precise timing and coordinated movement, with chalk marks faintly visible on the concrete to help her hit timing marks during the routine. The overnight drizzle had created shallow puddles in low spots, and the smooth concrete became particularly slippery when wet. Tiffany wore shoes with smooth soles that provided minimal traction on wet surfaces. She set her phone on a compact stand positioned to capture both her performance and the skyline backdrop. The recorded take began with Tiffany executing the opening moves with her characteristic energy and precision. The choreography included a pivot and lateral step that brought her toward one of the chalk timing marks, placed near the edge to maximize the dramatic effect of the skyline background. As she performed the pivot, her foot landed in one of the shallow puddles that had formed overnight, immediately reducing friction between her smooth-soled shoes and the polished concrete surface. The loss of traction occurred at the worst possible moment, as momentum from her spinning movement carried her toward the low parapet wall that marked the edge. She attempted to arrest her slide by reaching for the parapet, but the wet concrete provided insufficient grip for her hands to find purchase on the smooth surface. The combination of her forward momentum from the dance move and the slippery conditions created a situation where recovery was impossible once the slide began. Tiffany's center of mass carried her over the low parapet wall, and she fell to the parking level below. The phone continued recording throughout the entire tragic sequence, capturing her final moments as she lost her footing and fell. Her friend immediately rushed to the parapet edge and called down to assess the situation, while the building attendant quickly radioed for emergency assistance. The two office workers helped keep the area clear while waiting for professional responders. The incident prompted immediate safety improvements throughout the parking structure, including increased parapet height and anti-slip coatings on all rooftop surfaces. Setback markers were added to keep pedestrians and performers at safe distances from all edges, and warning signage was posted about slip hazards during wet conditions. The community response emphasized the importance of maintaining safe distances from edges during performance filming, particularly in wet conditions where traction could be compromised without warning. A remembrance gathering was held at a public plaza with certified railings and non-slip surfacing, where friends could safely celebrate Tiffany's memory while highlighting the importance of location safety in content creation. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.